Have any of you stopped to consider that your use of your gas stove could be harming the stakeholders in your neighborhood? I mean, the indoor pollutants alone are causing a decline in the cognitive function of the people you live with. So says Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's the story, actually, that a U.S. federal agency is considering a ban on gas stoves. We saw it reported across the board. CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Post. But apparently, my friends, it's all fake news. Snopes saith. Is the Biden administration banning gas stoves over climate change concerns? False. Well then, Snopes hereby proves that CNN is fake news. Or is it? My friends, you are not just looking at a story that is some crackpot climate change agenda. You're looking at a psyop. Basically, the way it's broken down is quite simple. Right now, we have a statement from the Consumer Product Safety Commission saying, no, we're not banning anything, despite the fact that many politicians and news outlets reported it. David Harsanyi on Twitter, senior editor for The Federalist, points out they release these trial balloons. A bunch of senators and lawmakers defend the idea. When it backfires, Democrat columnists will mock people for reacting to it. Amazing. CNN reported this Wednesday, January 11th, 9:12 a.m., updated that they were considering a ban on gas stoves. Now they're coming out and saying no. Maybe it's just a mistake, to be completely honest. Maybe some guy misspoke in a Bloomberg interview and said, we want to ban gas stoves. And they're like, what are you, nuts? You can't do that. Reverse. But not before a bunch of leftists and Democrats, people like AOC, came out and said, actually, it's a really good idea. We should get rid of natural gas. Very interesting. Very interesting. I think it's an element of a psyop. As was mentioned, you will be mocked if you say you believe this story was real, despite the fact that CNN said it was real. Let's read the story from CNN Business. They reported, and then I want to stress too, this is NewsGuard certified CNN definitively reporting that a federal agency wants to ban gas stoves. Just because they've come out now and said, no, that's not true, doesn't mean they didn't intend to do it. CNN reports, a federal agency is considering a ban on gas stoves, a source of indoor pollution linked to childhood asthma. Interesting. In an interview with Bloomberg, a U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commissioner said gas stove usage is a hidden hazard. Quote, any option is on the table. Products that can't be made safe can be banned. Agency Commissioner Richard Trumka Jr. told Bloomberg. The report said the agency plans to take action to address the indoor pollution caused by stoves. The indoor pollution? What, like when I burn my bacon and the smoke alarm goes off or something? Or are you saying that there's natural gas being released? We can smell it when it is. The CPSC has been considering action on gas stoves for months. Trumka recommended in October that the CPSC seek public comment on the hazards associated with gas stoves. The pollutants have been linked to asthma and worsening respiratory conditions. We don't use natural gas here at Timcast. We use clean electricity. Clean all the way from the coal plant that generates it. Anyway, a December 2022 study in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health found that indoor gas stove usage is associated with an increased risk of current asthma among children. The study found that almost 13% of current childhood asthma in the U.S. is attributable to gas stove use. Okay, I mean, that's bad. Let people know and they can decide for themselves. Trumka told Bloomberg the agency plans to open public comment on gas stove hazards. Options besides a ban include setting standards on emissions from the appliances. 35% of households in the United States use a gas stove, and the number approaches 70% in some states like California and New Jersey. Other studies have found these stoves emit significant levels of nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and fine particulate matter. Without proper ventilation, can raise the level of indoor concentration levels to unsafe levels as deemed by the EPA. Oh, heavens. Quote, short-term exposure to NO2 is linked to worsening asthma in children, and long-term exposure has been determined to likely cause the development of asthma. A group of lawmakers said in a letter to Chair Alexander Hohen-Sarek, adding, It can also exacerbate cardiovascular illness. I want to stress, as much as we get the point they want to ban gas stoves, as much as we get the point, they definitively reported this. And we can jump over to our good friend, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Ronnie Jackson says, I'll never give up my gas stove. If the maniacs in the White House come for my stove, they can pry it from my cold, dead hands. Come and take it. Ronnie Jackson, of course, being somewhat facetious. AOC says, did you know that ongoing exposure to NO2 from gas stoves is linked to reduced cognitive performance? You can read more about it here and a link to vox.com. Okay, May 11th, 2020. Gas stoves can generate unsafe levels of indoor air pollution. Yeah, I don't doubt them, and I don't really care. The issue is they wanted to ban it for this reason, and now they're lying about it. Creepy. There's a secret pollution source in 40 million homes. The U.S. may try to ban it. The hidden hazard of gas stoves, indoor air quality exposure, and asthma is finally getting attention. This story from just the other day at 3:49 p.m. The U.S. may try to ban it. So saith multiple news organizations. But let's throw it to our good friends over at Snopes.com who say false. No. Now hold on there a minute. Here's the game Snopes plays. Is the Biden administration banning gas stoves over climate change concerns? False. It has nothing to do with climate change. It has everything to do with NO2 and cognitive performance. This is the PSYOP. This is the game they play. This is how they reinforce the cult. Those of us that read the news and pay attention saw them definitively tell us they wanted to ban gas stoves. They laid out exactly why. But the cult members don't read, don't know anything, and they're going to follow the pundits who then say, no, they're not banning that. It's fake news. The fascists are lying to you. And that's where we're at now. And they'll show you this article from Snopes. And this is what Aunt Edna and your liberal relatives will start saying to you. I read on Snopes, that was fake news. This is the game that the fact checkers play. You'll say something like, you guys, for those of you that watch all my content, you've heard me explain it before. Bear with me for those that aren't familiar. Donald Trump goes on to the balcony at Mar-a-Lago and does a perfect front flip, landing in a superhero pose on the ground. And then everyone's like, I can't believe it. Donald Trump just did a front flip off his balcony onto the ground. Boom. Here's video of it. We filmed it. His hair is flowing. He's got eyes are glowing. And then Snopes runs the story. Did Donald Trump front flip off his balcony landing in a superhero pose on Sunday morning? False. Though Donald Trump did do the superhero pose and did front flip, it was actually Sunday afternoon. You see, it was 12:01 p.m. Thus, technically, it was the afternoon. They add the thing at the end to make it false. Is the Biden administration banning gas stoves over climate change concerns? And they say false. It's not about climate change. Why would they add context no one asked for? The stories being run and the commentary isn't about climate change. It's about pollutants. It's about Biden wanting to ban it, period. The Biden administration. They added nonsense to the story that no one brought up so they can slap a false label on it. Here we go. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration is planning to ban gas stoves over concerns surrounding climate change. False. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, a federal agency, is not currently considering a ban on gas stoves, though the commissioner said anything is on the table if they can't be made safer due to concerns over harmful indoor pollutants that cause health and respiratory problems. Numerous cities and counties have already enforced policies requiring a shift from fossil fuel-powered buildings. The CPSC also said that no regulatory guidelines are currently in place, and adding any would involve a lengthy process. You know, I don't care. I just don't like being lied to, right? If you want to ban gas stoves, you need only come out and be like, we want to ban gas stoves. And I would say, okay, why? I don't care. You know, we had Chef Andrew Gruel come hang out, and we asked him, like, electric versus gas. I got to be completely honest. I personally prefer electric stoves. I do. I know I can hear everybody yelling. I was at an Airbnb and I'm cooking up my bacon. and like the flame is moving and the bacon's cooking uneven. And I'm like, what's going on? It's just natural gas. Get out of here. I got the electric stove, evenly heats the whole pan. I love it. Plus, none of that indoor pollution. So I don't care. I really don't. I think it's stupid. If you want to slowly phase out natural gas stoves, whatever. If you want to get off natural gas in the homes, so be it. Whatever. Just don't lie to me and play these stupid games. And I feel this is true for all of you as well. I feel most people are probably going to be like, look, man, I'm not going to cry about a gas stove. I will debate you. I like my gas stove. Whatever. It's the lying that's the problem. Win your arguments. Here we go. Look what they say. A January 2023 rumor about a possible ban on gas stoves in the U.S. worried consumers, particularly as noted in conservative media outlets. Some social media users claimed that U.S. President Biden's administration was considering a ban over climate change concerns. Yes, Liz Churchill ate on Twitter. The Biden administration is going to outlaw gas stoves because of climate change. Here's Jill and her gas stove. That is not accurate. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is not considering new guidelines for regulating or banning gas stoves. Full on lies. Okay, you know what? Fine. Who am I going to believe? CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Post, or Snopes? It's all just silly, broken, garbled nonsense. Now, maybe it's not anything deeper or more nefarious. Maybe Snopes is just putting out fake news because Snopes is fake news. Maybe CNN and Washington Post and New York Post are all fake news. But considering the ideological disparity between the New York Post and the Washington Post, I kind of think it's probably true that they wanted to do this. And the reality is, a prominent official came out and said they wanted to do it. That's it. And now we have this statement. Ari Natter says, breaking. The chair of the Consumer Product Safety Commission says the agency has no plans to ban gas stoves after Commissioner Richard Trumka's remarks ignited a political firestorm. This from 10:52 a.m. today. They wrote, over the past several days, there's been a lot of attention paid to gas stove emissions and to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Research indicates that emissions from gas stoves can be hazardous, and the CPSC is looking for ways to reduce related indoor air quality hazards. But to be clear, I am not looking to ban gas stoves, and the CPSC has no proceeding to do so. CPSC is researching gas emissions in stoves and exploring new ways to address any health risks. CPSC also is actively engaged in strengthening voluntary safety standards for gas stoves. This spring, we'll be asking the public to provide us with information about gas stove emissions and potential solutions for reducing any associated risks. This is part of our product safety mission, learning about hazards and working to make products safer. So my question, why is AOC coming out on the side of banning gas stoves? One person responded saying, real question. If we all have to switch to electric, will there be any government assistance to do that? AOC says the way we are handling it in New York City isn't to force people to switch what they already have. Folks can keep their appliances, and new buildings in New York City will have gas-free stoves. As for federally, any proposal from the CPSC would go through quite a lengthy review and input process. Okay. They said, that sounds good. What if the gas-free stoves cost more? Will there be a genuine effort to improve the engineering to cut costs and just be real with the public? That'll be a struggle at the beginning and a sacrifice. Will honesty about the real immediate cost come out? AOC responds, yes, keep an eye out for tax credits and rebates for gas-free appliances that may roll out this year. The Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last year contains funding for a lot of different climate-related rebates for people, not just EVs. Serious question, says one person. I live in an area where the power goes out fairly frequently due to storms. My gas stove gives me a way to cook for my family and a source of heat if it's a winter storm. What are we supposed to do? Electric stoves aren't feasible in New Hampshire. You will own nothing and you will be happy. That's where we're all headed. Look, man, I see all these cars. I see all these people. I see these buildings. I see the city streets. I see the swarms of human beings everywhere. I see the numbers. 30 million people living in this place, 60 million in this place, 300 million, a billion. That's a lot of people. You can't possibly think that the planet can sustain an infinite number of people. No. But I believe in human ingenuity because we've seen it proven time and time again. It's insane to me that these people would look back at history and see every single problem humanity faced solved by intelligence and human rationality. And they'd be like, this is the one time humans can't solve a problem. I don't buy it. And now, of course, they'll come out and say, banning gas stoves is the solution. We are. No, 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 no. The solution to the problem is a technological advancement. Now, you can argue that electric stoves are that advancement, but we didn't make horses illegal. We just made cars. Now, of course, there is a challenge. People have stoves. They don't want to fix them. Well, gas prices are going to go up, and maybe there is a way to get people on electric stoves, fine. But what about people who have power outages? I think the reality is there's better ways to do things, but decentralization and diversity of technological appliances is probably the right way to go. Now, look, AOC is not saying she's going to take your stove away. They're phasing it out. But what happens when the city starts saying eventually there's not enough gas customers to sustain gas lines in the city, so we're getting rid of them, and then you get a notice? It will happen. I'm not against progress and development. And there is a question to be said about these massive systems we have and the problems surrounding them. I'll give you an example. In New York City, they have these big nitrogen tanks and they blast nitrogen underground. Now, I don't know exactly, I've not talked to the city about it, but what I was told by locals when I lived there was that the underground cables get so hot they start melting. So they blast nitrogen underground to cool the cables down. You walk through New York, there's no power lines anywhere. You walk through smaller cities, there's power lines everywhere because New York put them underground. They get too hot, they melt. They got to cool them down by blasting them with nitrogen. That's not a sustainable system. Eventually, it'll all come crashing down. You've got to make changes. And I'll fully admit I'll be the first person. If everybody's using something I read this article about our power lines. Effectively, a 120-year-old machine that's never been updated. And we could probably do a better job, right? When I was in Ukraine years and years ago, I had garbage cell service. But actually, it wasn't that bad. I was getting 1.2 megabits per second up using 3G. And I thought it was weird. I was like, how come we don't get that on 3G? I think it was CDMA. I was like, how come we don't get those at bandwidth in the United States? Simply put, the United States builds a cellular network using preliminary technology. We roll out cell tech. We then implement it, and we get a good 100 kilobits per second. Bear with me if you're not familiar with what this stuff means. Basically, you get 0.1 megabits. We're all happy with it. 10 years later, we still have the system in place, and nobody wants to spend the money to update it because our phones still work. Then, over in, say, Ukraine, they're like, we're going to build the exact same system. But over the past 10 years, there's been major updates. Our system will run 10 times faster because of certain tweaks we can make. So you end up looking at these other countries and you're like, why is our internet slower? Because we built it first. How do we then overhaul these machines and these systems? Serious question, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But we got to do things better. So I have no problem with saying, personally, I like electric stoves more than gas. I don't care to have gas, not interested, but not everybody feels the same way. There's a real question about if you're going to, as the government, force people off of these things to do more than just tax rebates. You can't force people to stop. How do we alter these systems in mass? It's an interesting question. Ultimately, I think capitalism solves the problem. Eventually, someone will be like, my stove is obsolete. Hey, guess what? You're going to have to buy a new one. And then you're going to have to get an electric, you plug it in, I guess. I don't know what kind of amperage they use for the electric stoves, but probably a little bit more than normal to heat things up. Same thing with cars. The bigger challenge I see is not that they're asking you to cook with electric versus gas. The bigger challenge, the bigger problem I see first and foremost, that they're lying, they're manipulating, and they treat people like they're idiots instead of actually being for of and by the people. But I think there's challenges in widespread implementation. I think there's challenges in trying to get everyone to go electric when, as this person mentioned, their power goes out. But more importantly, I think the scarier thing is the smart component of all these new devices. One day, you'll go to cook some eggs, and your stove is going to say, I'm sorry, John, I can't turn on. Energy costs are too high. You've overconsumed. Your carbon emissions for this month are 326% above average. That's what I'm worried about. You're going to go to your car, and your car is you're going to sit in it, it's going to be like 20%, and it's going to be like, cannot charge over your emissions allotment. That's where we're headed. Now, to be fair, maybe, people do overconsume. There was this interesting thing I was reading about. I forgot what the law is called. But when you increase the supply of gas, It doesn't necessarily make gas cheaper. It typically does, but the idea is people drive more. So they just start driving more and more and more because of the abundance. And so the challenge is, how do we properly maintain energy consumption and have some stability in our economy? I don't know. I don't have all the answers. What I can say is it's fascinating to see the psyops in real time. They do want to ban your gas stove. They've talked about doing it, and everybody reported on it. They're now walking it back because they realized there was a massive backlash. In New York, they have already done this. In other states, they're already doing it. You can't get new gas stoves. That's where we're headed. That's why they announced it. I don't care about gas stoves. I don't like it. Just stop lying. Anyway, what a stupid waste of our time. Anyway, well, I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.